And so a lot of these social networks, they have a chicken or the egg type of problem when they're starting out. Is nobody wants to post to it unless there's an audience to post to, but then there's not going to be an audience until you have people creating on it. But would you say that because you didn't focus on a feed first, you offered immediate utility in that it was like a clean way to collect email addresses? So even if your platform failed, they would at least have all these email addresses. Was that kind of how you didn't have to really deal with the chicken or the egg problem to start with?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, that's so spot on. I think the general philosophy behind this whole thing is that you come for the tools and you stay for the network. We were getting pushed pretty early to abandon the network component of the whole thing. Everyone was just like, why don't you just make a better website essentially for comedians? And I am a very, very firm believer in network effects. And so we resisted that. We were pretty close because we were having a hard time getting anybody to adopt it, but we stayed true to the network component. And so you're spot on, where it's just we're able to show people. We had a very rudimentary dashboard of how many people had signed up for a given email list, and we're able to just kind of show them hey, you got 1,000, you got 2,000, you got 5,000. And so it was just, it's so amazing reflecting on it because it was so rudimentary at the time. But yeah, that was kind of it. And we just, assured them, hey, if this thing doesn't work, we will just give you the emails and you can do whatever you want.
For today's episode, we interviewed Danny Frankel, the co-founder of a platform called Punchup. In some ways, it's never been a better time to be a stand-up comedian. In previous eras, aspiring stand-ups had to slowly make their way up through the industry by performing in open mic nights and small venues. But now a few viral video clips on Instagram or TikTok can instantly thrust a new comedian into the spotlight. But even if a stand-up has millions of followers on social media, it can be difficult to monetize their fan base. There's no easy way to alert followers in a certain geographic area that you're performing at a local venue, and social media moderation algorithms consistently throttle reach, especially if a comedian talks about controversial topics. Danny and a co-founder launched Punchup in 2023 to solve these problems. His platform allows comedians to place their video content behind a gate that collects user email addresses and locations. It also allows venues to sell tickets to events directly through Punchup. Comedians can even directly sell their stand-up specials on the site. Punchup has already attracted several big-name comedians to its network, including Shane Gillis and Tom Segura. In a recent interview, Danny walked through the economics of stand-up comedy, explained how his experience selling ads on Meta informed Punchup's service offerings, and outlined his long-term ambitions for the platform. Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcast. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey, Danny, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
So you have this platform that you co-founded that's focused on helping comedians in terms of finding their fan bases, selling specials, selling tickets, and I obviously want to talk about all the steps that led up to the launch of it and the insights and stuff like that. But first, I'd just love to hear about your background with stand-up comedy. Did you ever do stand-up comedy yourself, or were you always just kind of like a comedy geek?
I did do stand-up comedy myself very poorly for a period of time in San Francisco and very briefly in New York. I had a kid 3 years ago now, and while I was on my paternity leave, I got back into it very briefly. Until I realized that I suck at it and I should just help others be funny as opposed to trying to do it myself.
Yeah, and so what was when did you start? Was it watching stand-up specials on TV, or did you start going to live? What's kind of your history of live stand-up comedy in terms of as a fan?
Yeah, I've loved stand-up comedy ever since I was a really young kid. I was very early exposed to George Carlin, who's had a massive impact on the way that I think about life in general, quite honestly, and has been a huge influence in how I've structured the company and how we operate overall. I've just loved jokes. I think, making people laugh feels like one of the least controversial aspects of positivity in the world, and I think I've just naturally gravitated towards it just simply because it feels good to laugh, and have always desired to do that for others and enjoy it when it happens to me.
Have you traditionally gone to a lot of live shows, when your favorite comics come to town?
Yeah, I have 2 young kids now, so I do not go to nearly as many as I would like, but I used to go to a whole bunch of comedy shows when I lived in New York. So when I was in my early 20s, I started at Facebook and spent a ton of time at the Comedy Cellar. I yeah, it was just so fun getting exposed to a lot of the people that have now actually become good friends of mine, but at the time were just really heroes of mine from a comedic standpoint. And when I lived in San Francisco, I went to a ton of shows all over the place as well. I'm short, so it ends up being very nice to go to shows that have an expectation of being seated, because I can actually see the stage, as opposed to, a lot of music shows. Bill Graham Auditorium, as an example, in San Francisco, we would always get floor seats, and it sucked because I don't think I ever saw the stage a single time. So I think that also has some level of my bias towards comedy.
And you mentioned George Carlin. Were there any others that you kind of religiously always got tickets when they come to town or anything like that?
Yeah, I never saw George live. We're on a first name basis, obviously. When they came to town when I was younger, Bill Burr came and played in San Francisco. I remember that. I was a huge Louis fan when I first got out of school. Make sure to see him. I'm going to end up missing a whole bunch of people here, but those were kind of the immediate staples, I would say. With, I'm sure, massive regret once I get off this podcast of 12 others that I made sure to always go see.
Yeah, I used to see Louis C.K. years ago, and then I always used to catch like Mike Birbiglia when he was coming into town. Those were kind of my two favorites.
Jim Jeffries another one for me. I really, really got into stand-up in college, and Louis kind of hit his peak when I was still in high school, and then through college, Jim Jeffries really came onto the scene for me, at least when I was in college. And I loved his comedy when I was a lot younger, and still do.
So I looked at your LinkedIn. It looked like after college you moved to DC for just a couple of years and interned with various congressional offices and stuff like that. And then you worked at Accenture for I guess a few years. So what was kind of your when you were someone was asking you in your earlier 20s like what you wanted to do? What was that?
Yeah, so I grew up right outside DC, so politics is just kind of the hometown business area, I guess. So I was really into politics when I was in high school and even in college. I interned for congressman in college, and I actually interned for John Kerry as well for a period of time. After college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Everybody went into either consulting or investment banking or something along those lines. I kind of just followed the herd. So there was no real intended path. I think for the most part, I took a lot of the advice that people generally gave, which was just go for somewhat of a generalist position so you can set yourself up for what you want to do later. Looking back on that, really regret it, actually. I didn't really learn very much working at Accenture except how to just kind of pass time. And wish that I had gone and earlier pursued real areas of passion. But I was still very lucky. After 2 years at Accenture, I found my way over to Facebook and worked there for essentially the rest of my career up until I started this company.
Yeah, and so you worked at Facebook, I think, for like 11 or 12 years. I think there was a brief stint where you left to go work at another company. And I was listening to or reading an interview with you where you didn't really know how you got your job at Facebook. I guess it was on a hiring spree. It was hungry for young, educated people. And what did you end up doing for them?
Everything about how I got my job at Facebook is funny. First, just like how I got into the interview pipeline was funny, but also how I ended up getting hired was wild in that I basically had no idea what the job was that I was interviewing for. I just knew that it was working at Facebook, which seemed cool, and it was in New York, which is where I wanted to live. And so I essentially went into the interview and just spent the first interview asking someone like what the job was, what it would require, etc., and then just regurgitated those answers to the next 4 people who interviewed me and somehow passed the interview loop and ended up getting the job. And actually on day 1 of orientation, I had to go to a new coworker of mine and literally ask her, like, what the hell is this job? So I started there at the very bottom of the company. It was a job called advertising operations, where back in the day, there was no real programmatic way to be buying ads on Facebook. It was all direct sales, and it was all just for that right-hand column that still exists on Facebook, but people don't really pay attention to. And so, a salesperson would sell Procter & Gamble on an advertisement there, and it was my job to come in and ask for the image, ask for the copy, ask for how long it was supposed to run, how much money they were supposed to spend, and set it all up manually to then run on that right-hand side, and try to make the company money, which was something they, ironically enough, were not very good at back in the day.
Yeah, and then obviously they perfected the kind of native ad that lived in the feed, and then once they did that, they could, you could basically get as granular as you wanted to in terms of how you targeted and stuff like that.
It's been an interesting progression, not to nerd out on ad stuff, but Facebook started off actually having the real value add of just knowing your age and location, because everyone else had to infer that information. Facebook had people voluntarily submit that information about themselves. So the accuracy was significantly better. Then they got into this behavioral targeting stuff where it was able to predict, hey, such and such person likes comedy or likes, skiing or whatever it is, so they showed ads that way. Now it's actually much different in that it's all AI driven. And so a lot of people are still trying to market on Facebook with this more interest targeting based solutions, but the reality is you actually just want to let the system figure out who to show the ads to. And so they've, in some ways, removed all targeting necessary on Facebook, and you just kind of let the system decide for you.
That's interesting. And so, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because I think there are some parallels to what you're doing now in terms of kind of that direct marketing connection between content and then sales and stuff like that. But so did you stay on the advertising side for Facebook your entire career there? Yeah.
That was my life.
And so what did you transition to doing after you no longer had to sell each and upload each ad by hand?
Yeah, I went from that ad operations role to a marketing role. And then I had a little bit of data experience, and I was actually the first person to ever release data externally outside of the Facebook walls around Facebook usage. So this sounds crazy, but at the time, Facebook, I don't believe, or maybe had just gone public, but had never released any demographic information. They just released the top line, this is how many users we have globally. And so I was the first person to be able to share data outside of Facebook with how many users there were on a daily basis, monthly basis, across each different type of platform and in each geographic region. And from there realized there's a ton of demand. People really want to understand what is actually going on with the Facebook user base. And so from there, we actually created the Consumer Insights Group, where I led the whole data, I forget what it was called, but the data aspect of it all. And then from there, I joined the ads measurement team. And then from there, I worked a lot on data privacy. There were some really interesting changes that came about around 2019 in the ad space around privacy. Again, I'm going to nerd out here and lose everybody's attention, but essentially just trying to figure out how to balance privacy while still enabling personalized advertising. And that, ironically enough, actually led to Punchup, but
yeah, and we'll get into that. So, I talk to a lot of media entrepreneurs today, and and a lot of millennials and even younger people as well think as Facebook specifically is almost like a dead social network. You log in there. Most of the people that I used to follow in circa 2010 hardly ever post there anymore. And then they started, copying TikTok in terms of suggested content. And that's now what you see most of the time when you log on there. But despite all that, people I talk to, especially in the email acquisition space, people who run these huge newsletters, they still almost exclusively advertise on Facebook, because it's one of the only remaining places where you could put $1 into it and know you get to you could actual measure the unit economics of the value of your ad. That if I put in $1, I know I'm going to get 3 email addresses, and then I will be able to monetize those email addresses through my newsletter, making X amount of money, and this will be the lifetime value of the user. And so as long as you're making more money from those users than you're putting into Facebook, then all the unit economics work and you're profitable. And so it's just it's still, even though a lot of people don't post to it anymore, one of the best advertising machines that have ever been invented. Would you, before we go on, would you agree with that as one of the value propositions of Facebook marketing and Facebook advertising?
Well, I think there's two different parts to it. So first is like, are people still using Facebook? And the second part is actually like clarifying a bit. When you say advertising on Facebook, if anybody's running ads, they are probably running ads across Facebook, Instagram, and now Threads. So on the is anybody using Facebook piece? I mean, like,
and when I say using, I mean posting. I know there are a lot of lurkers on Facebook, but okay, keep on going.
Well, so that's a very interesting topic in general about social networks, which is like the ratio of consumption to posting. And that was always the interesting thing about Twitter, is like it had a high degree of usage, but very low like individual posting numbers. And I think you have kind of seen that a bit on the Facebook side as well, but that's also true just in social media overall. And that's like, there have been a few different transitions that have happened. And like, that's a big one, which was Facebook and Instagram both used to be about you and I sharing photos of our dogs. And now it's much more about watching creators or public figures post content about their lives. And so naturally that ratio of consumption to posting has come down across the board. On the usage side specifically, like I think Facebook still has some niches of like Facebook groups, Facebook Marketplace that drives a lot of usage. On the posting side, I mean, like you get very different videos. I actually kind of like the videos on Facebook more than on Instagram in some ways, because like Facebook is so bizarre and out there. Like it's just like pictures of or videos of people slicing open sushi and like old tennis highlights for me at least. And like I oddly seem to like, you know, raw fish cutting. But I think on the advertising side, you know, it's hard to argue. Like Meta has set up an amazing business model of finding the right person to be showing the ad to, and they just also have so many people that there just aren't many businesses that can really compete for the value and the reach that you can get there.
Yeah. And so what was kind of your awareness of obviously you were always a stand-up comedy fan, but like how obviously Punchup, it's wanting to solve a lot of problems within the stand-up comedy space. How did you become aware of those problems? Like, were you listening to podcasts or something that talked where these comics would talk like about the behind the scenes challenges they were having? Like, what was kind of while you were still at Meta, like what was your general awareness of the business behind stand-up comedy?
Great question. So in 2010, I recognized Steve Byrne in a bar in DC, and through him got introduced to a few other comedians, and would just kind of help them on my spare time running ads for their shows. So I guess the first thing I recognized is that comedians didn't really know how to market their shows and didn't have any real support in doing that. The second piece came in 2020. Sam Morrell had a problem with his Instagram account, and I realized how quickly their business could be impacted by losing access to these accounts. Everything ended up getting resolved for him, but like it really left a lasting impression of like the difference between something that you own versus an audience that you're in some ways renting. And so those two pieces kind of came together of like, all right, they need help selling more tickets, and they need a more durable model for being able to reach their fans, or a more consistent model. And so those were two of the cornerstones that we started with Punchup, and you know, it's obviously evolved significantly since then.
And then the issue that you're referring to was a content moderation issue, right?
It was a content moderation issue, yep.
Yeah. And so is that generally a problem? Obviously, comics are always kind of going up to the edges of what's like, you know, politically correct and socially acceptable to say. Obviously, platforms are in the business of trying to moderate content across billions of users, which means that a lot of stuff gets caught in that filter that might be sarcasm or comedy or not actually what the algorithm thinks they're saying. Is that kind of true?
Yeah, that's, I mean, you know, the platforms have a really tough job because, you know, there's billions and billions and billions of pieces of content, and being able to understand nuance across those is really difficult. And similarly, you know, artists want to have free expression and be able to use it as an opportunity to be able to put out work that they're proud of. And sometimes that requires nuance. And so those two things are not always compatible. And ultimately, platforms are the ones currently with power. And so it ends up, you know, dictating unfortunately, some ways, like what the creative output is, just because people are so afraid of getting dinged.
Yeah, and is that something when you're talking to comics, they talk about having to self-censor and stuff like that because they're constantly trying, like you see this where they say the word porn, they say the word corn, and they say unalive instead of dead. Like there's all these code words that you know, a lot of users use to just avoid these like algorithmic filters.
Yeah, I actually am trying to make a video right now of like the 100 dirty words you can't say, going back to George Carlin, on social media, because it is so ridiculous. And again, I'm not even blaming the social media companies, because ultimately it comes down to advertisers and what they're comfortable with. And that is like one of the key pieces, again, not faulting anybody, but like one of the key pieces that we identified is, for social media platforms, ultimately advertisers are the clients. They are the ones paying the money. But also these, you know, creators, entertainers are the ones supplying the content now that allow advertisers to pay the platforms to make the money. And so there's just like some level of incompatibility between those two points. But yeah, I mean, advertisers don't necessarily want to be seen next to someone talking about an unsavory topic. And so you go to these ridiculous lengths where, like, we all know what unalive means, but if you say dead, then your video might not get as much reach. Like, it's comically childish, the state that we've gotten to with it all. And I also don't think it's particularly effective. Like, I think that, you know, natural language processing and a lot of these technologies are smart enough to know like when someone is saying something bad. And so, you know, like if you're trying to say, you know, murder and you say just erder, like it knows what was supposed to come before then. So like we're just also doing things that just seem silly and don't really make a difference also at the end of the day. But it's so opaque, no one really knows. And it really has reached such absurd levels now when you watch videos where it's just like, what the hell did you just say? I heard like 4 bizarre words that make no sense together, but like if you just hear it quickly enough, you're like, all right, I guess they're just trying to make a joke about, I don't know, foot fetishes, and you just can't say the word fetish, and it's just like, I don't know what this means. Can't tell if you actually just love feet or not.
Yeah, and as someone who, you know, was a fan of comedy in the 2000s, how has the market for stand-up comedians changed in terms of, like, obviously Louis C.K. did that famous instance where he sold his own special on his website. We've got comedians now that are putting entire specials on YouTube. Obviously, there are just so many more tools at comedians' disposals. Like, so many comedians now have podcasts and stuff like that. How much has the market shifted towards, like, the direct-to-consumer approach for comedians where they are kind of responsible for their own career trajectory, and it has a little bit less to do with, you know, slowly working their way up through comedy clubs from open mics to stadiums? Like, how much has that market really shifted?
I mean, I'm certainly trying to make it shift a lot. I think what's changed in what you're kind of hinting at are gatekeepers, right? Like, what was the reason that you needed to go from the open mic to, you know, being the MC to then being a middle to then headline? Like, the reason was you needed to keep kind of passing through these levels of success, essentially. And now, since you're able, like, social media is one of the most amazing things imaginable for comedians. You know, we're talking about some of the negative side on the moderation piece, but like also you can reach millions and millions of people whenever you want just by like putting your phone up. Like, that's incredible. And it's changed the industry entirely. And so, you know, now the gatekeepers are kind of gone, and it's really up to the comedian to do a good job of building their fan base, which is amazing for some comedians and really terrible for others. Like, I do not believe that we would have a Mitch Hedberg currently, because I don't think Mitch Hedberg would be able to handle social media, quite honestly. And so it was great that there were these shepherds that could recognize the talent and like put him all in front of our faces on Comedy Central so that we know who he is. But on the other side, there's a lot of comedians that have amazing careers now because they were able to go directly to the consumer. So it's somewhat of a mixed bag.
And so what were some of the pain points, even as they were going more to direct to consumer, they were building their own audiences? Obviously, like, there's the regional and local component to stand-up comedy. It's like, I'm coming to Nashville, I maybe don't have a ton of notice that I'm coming to Nashville because not everyone's big enough to have like a whole tour. How do I alert my fans in Nashville that that I'm going to be at such and such comedy thing tonight? I just saw on Threads there was this comedian who had like over 1 million followers who was ranting about how he was thinking about quitting just because like the platforms were just not showing his content to people anymore, and it was really hard for him if he was like going to be in Nashville, even though he had 1 million Instagram followers. It's not like Instagram would necessarily show his post announcing he was going to be in Nashville to people who lived in Nashville. Was that some of the pain points that you were hearing about at all?
Yeah, so I think overall, like, that is the key issues. You have this massively powerful tool of being able to reach millions of people. So one, how do you use that to best let people know on a local scale? Two, what are more reliable methods that you could be using so that you're not entirely dependent on this fire hose essentially to reach the right people? And then the third is like, are there paid opportunities that like you said before, if you put $1 in, you're going to get $2 out. So on the first point that you were making of just like posting what I would call organically on these social media sites, the main opportunity there is both understanding what kind of content is going to end up getting delivered to the right people to want to actually go see your shows. The second key piece is understanding what kind of content actually gets people not just to like something, but actually go buy the tickets. The third piece is understanding how you can move the people who are following you on these social media platforms to a more reliable channel. So what we do at Punchup, for instance, is we allow comedians to post a whole bunch of content that they can put behind what we're calling like an email wall, where to be able to watch it, be able to sign up for your email or phone list. And so we're having huge success. Like, we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who sign up for mailing lists now for different comedians. And so those people, they're able to reach more reliably. And then the last key piece is we help people run advertising much more effectively, so that if they have 1 million followers and it's not translating into enough sales and they haven't been able to bring enough of those people over and reach them through email or texting, then you can pay these platforms to make sure that you are reaching people who do want to go see your shows.
So prior to the launch of Punchup, how did comedians solve this? I seem to remember like Dimitri Martin and a few others urging people on Instagram, go sign up for their email list. And then I guess they had like some specialized form that they created with like Constant Contact or MailChimp or something, where you would actually enter your zip code, or like, was that kind of the kind of hack together way that comedians would normally deal with this, or were most comedians not even that sophisticated, even the bigger ones?
Yeah, I don't think many were very sophisticated. I mean, like, Kevin Hart is kind of the famous example here of, like, he would, I believe, just like leave a pen and paper at every club that he went to and like just collect a massive email list. Louis was the first one who did it in a very intelligent way, I would say, where he was doing it through conversion data. So he was selling all of his specials on his site, and he would have people opt into his mailing list when they were buying something. And so he was able to collect it a lot more passively and at a lot higher scale. Other comedians, I'm sure, had mailing lists on their websites, but like, for the most part, they were either not collecting location data, they did not have the privacy policy set up properly, and there was no real carrot to get anybody to want to sign up. On the Louis side, people were signing up because they wanted to buy something. On the Kevin Hart side, they were probably signing up because he was going up to everybody and being like, please sign up for this, or please put in your information. And so I don't think many got particular success. I think Aziz also was someone who tried to do this much earlier on. But again, you need a carrot. You need some incentive for people to want to sign up. Otherwise, you're just going to truly get like the ultimate diehard fans. And really, what you need is the people who are going to go see you and fill out the Beacon Theater, not just like your 1,000 most diehard fans that want to know exactly when you're coming to town and will seek out the opportunity to sign up for your mailing list.
And presumably, it's always been possible, or at least for the past 10 years, to, if you had 1 million followers on Facebook or Instagram or something, you could target direct those followers who lived in certain zip codes and stuff like that.
I think about it a little differently. So if you have 1 million followers, then the hope is that you are reaching some percentage of those followers on a regular basis. it was always possible for you to advertise and reach any demographics that you want if you were paying for it. One of those targeting options would have been the people who are following you, but it would have been a little bit redundant, because theoretically there were times in the past where you were able to reach a lot more of your followers. Now, just due to the dynamics of the algorithm and the network, you don't end up reaching most of the people who end up following you, which is something that you hear pretty routinely from folks. And people are obviously frustrated because you get this sense that it's your own fan base, but in reality, like, it just doesn't work. Like, if you are following 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 different people, and there's only 500 stories that can show up for any given Instagram session, there's just not enough time to show all of those different people. And so you just inevitably end up reaching less and less of them.
Yeah. And so what year, so talk to me, like, so you have a co-founder. Talk to me about the discussions that led up to the launch of Punchup. Like, were you still at Meta at the time?
We had left Meta, and we're trying to figure out what to do, essentially. We had a hunch of an idea, but we needed to do a whole bunch of research to be convinced that it really made sense. So we spoke with, I think it was 14 different comedians and managers and agents and marketers, essentially, to understand if there really was a problem here. All we really knew, and I give a lot of credit to my co-founder Alex on this. I'm much more of like, hey, this is a good idea, let's go do this, and he's much more methodical in terms of like making sure that we're validating hypotheses. And the main thing that we realized was this email piece of just like, you can have an email on your website, but nobody's really going to your website anymore, and there's no real incentive to sign up. And so we just wanted to create a network where comedians could pool all their fan bases together and provide real incentive for people to want to sign up for your mailing list by basically having that content gate as like a, similar to if you go to any e-commerce site right now and they say, sign up for our mailing list and you get 15% off. The equivalent that we thought of was, all right, if there's some content that you want to be able to watch, you would sign up for someone's mailing list to be able to watch it, kind of mimicking the Louis model, but giving away for free as opposed to charging for it.
So what year was that when you came up with this idea?
2023.
2023, you talked to 14 comics, and was the next thing to pitch investors, or did you try to build like some bootstrap version of it first?
We built a bootstrap version of it first. So we bootstrapped it for, I want to say, 6 or 7 months. We couldn't have started the company at a worse time. We started it right as The Information came out. It's a famous tech publication, came out with an article saying that the creator economy was dead. This was as everything was kind of blowing up. I think crypto just absolutely collapsed, and so the venture market was just in a real state of chaos. And so, yeah, we just had a lot of belief in it and pushed through. And so we started in, I believe, June of 2023, and we did not fundraise until October of that year.
And so, thinking about like the fundamental MVP, was it just like a feed of content you could post to with like maybe some teaser video or something like that, and it just like once you were hit play to watch the whole video, like some kind of email sign up form popped up, or like what was kind of the functionality of how it worked?
Yeah, it was much more basic than that. It was just one page. So it was punchup.live/Steve-Burn. Steve was our first person to put a piece of content up. And so he put up a special that he had made and not released yet. And so we put it behind this wall. And yeah, you had to sign up for his mailing list. I think we got 3,000 or 4,000 people to do it in the first week or two, which was so exciting. Like, looking back on it now, like, we were so psyched. Just there were people online watching this thing at any given time. And then we started working on trying to get Joe List and Sam Morrell to engage. I had a prior relationship with Joe List and Sam, as I mentioned. And so I believe I was on my very delayed honeymoon when I got a call that Joe List special had been demonetized on YouTube and that they were finally interested in putting it on Punchup. So then we just had a separate page for Joe List, and then very quickly created a separate page for Sam Morril as well. And I don't even remember when the feed came about. I don't think there was a feed at that time. So I think that there were just those individual pages. It's kind of like Facebook back in the day, where like you just had your individual page and then they introduced the newsfeed.
And so a lot of these social networks, they have a chicken or the egg type of problem when they're starting out. Is like nobody wants to post to it unless there's an audience to post to, but then there's not going to be an audience until you have people creating on it. But would you say that because you didn't focus on a feed first, you offered immediate utility in that it was like a way to collect email addresses. So even if your platform failed, they would at least have all these email addresses. Was that kind of like how you kind of, didn't have to really deal with the chicken or the egg problem to start with?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, that's so spot on. I think the general philosophy behind this whole thing is that you come for the tools and you stay for the network. We were getting pushed pretty early to abandon the network component of the whole thing. Everyone was just like, why don't you just make a better website essentially for comedians? And I am a very, very firm believer in network effects. And so we resisted that. We were pretty close because we were having a hard time getting anybody to adopt it. But we stayed true to the network component. And so you're spot on, where it's just we're able to show people. We had a very rudimentary dashboard of how many people had signed up for a given email list, and we're able to just kind of show them hey, you got 1,000, you got 2,000, you got 5,000. And so it was just, it's so amazing reflecting on it because it was so rudimentary at the time. But yeah, that was kind of it, and we just, assured them, hey, if this thing doesn't work, we will just give you the emails and you can do whatever you want with them.
Yeah, and if you look at a lot of these creator economy platforms, they had the trajectory. They didn't start with the network. Like Patreon, if you had interviewed Jack Conte, 10 years ago, he would have told you that it's not Patreon's job to find your audience. That Patreon is, you build your audience elsewhere, like on YouTube or podcasts or something like that, and then you send it to Patreon for monetization. Same thing with Substack. Substack was merely, when it first launched, an email distribution, a collection and distribution through email. And then so Patreon has now introduced network effects where it has a feed and you could follow people without paying. And then Substack, of course, launched Substack Notes and has all sorts of network effects with it. So it seems like if you want to launch a platform today, first you need to show utility. Then once you have kind of a lot of users, then you could start introducing a feed to them, I think.
I think that's right, although I actually take a lot of pride that we saw this from the very start. And I think it's actually made life a lot easier. Because if you are starting with the network in mind, you can build everything with that piece. And I think, some of the platforms you've mentioned have struggled to figure out the exact dynamics, because if you already have things built and you have the dynamics already set for the site, it's hard to actually introduce a whole network component on it, and it changes kind of the user experience and user expectations. So yeah, I'm really proud that we actually saw that from the start.
So in terms of the collection of the email addresses, are you also do you have newsletter functionality within the site, or are they exporting those lists and sending those out through their own email service providers?
No, I'm incredibly proud of what we built, and all the kudos. I'm not an engineer, so I have not done any of it. Yeah, we have a whole email marketing solution that is awesome, and we're actually rolling out a whole bunch more features on it, so everything is homegrown. We, started off without that, obviously, so we were just using, a publicly available email solution and just paying for it, essentially, on behalf of the artists. But we've been building out more and more of that functionality within our own tooling.
So you have a dashboard, CMS or whatever. You're a comedian, you're going to Phoenix, you go in and filter for people within certain zip codes or something like that, and then it can all send it through the entire system.
Yeah, it's automatically sorted for your tour dates.
Okay, so let's talk about the early version is you could collect location-based email addresses by basically putting an email gate onto content. And I'm guessing all the early examples of successes was people posting on their Instagram, their Twitter, different stuff and just sending people to your website to this email gate, and you were able to collect a bunch of email addresses that way. That's kind of the early version. Then you raised some money. So how did it evolve from there? So like I know there's like can you actually like do video on demand buying of specials on your platform?
Oh yeah. We have some really cool stuff actually. So Mark Normand has a series going with us called Page to Stage, where you can watch him create a premise and then develop it all the way into a full bit that he delivers in some sort of a cool environment. One time was Carnegie Hall. We've done a few of these. We have Joe List, who put out an amazing documentary that he did on a really fun comedian named Tom Dustin. We have Michelle Wolf, who's putting out a weekly podcast on our site. It's definitely going to be a focus area for us, I'd say, in the next year. So yeah, we also done live streaming. So the idea is we have every type of content monetization available, whether it is subscription, one time, a bundle where you can basically sell 10 videos for one price or just an individual video for a different price. So we want to just give the artists as much flexibility as possible on however they want to make money from their stuff.
Yeah. And then obviously famously, the biggest comedians, you see these headlines, so-and-so sold a special to Netflix for $20 million or HBO or something like that. But if you're not Netflix level, is it basically you're stuck with like direct to consumer, or are there other options? Is that basically your only option for a special?
I would say for 98% of people, it is either YouTube or you put it with us.
Yeah, and by YouTube you mean the free version of YouTube, or like they putting there's some other version of it's all so just they have to make it free to available to everyone, and then just hope that they can monetize enough through ads.
Monetize through ads, and then really just make up the money in the next tour. I think that we lived through a very bizarre time where specials were being purchased for obscene amounts of money. Obscene is the wrong word, but for large amount of money. But really, like, a special at its core should just be an advertisement to go see someone live. There's also just like interesting dynamics, like music, you put out an album and then you go tour on that whole album. In comedy, you do a tour and then you put out a special afterwards. So I think there's like some interesting like open questions that haven't been fully resolved of like, how can you actually take some of the model that exists in music where like you put out a record, everybody's listening to it, everybody's excited, and then you have tour dates that come up right after, as opposed to the comedy scenario where you're touring, you put out the special, tons of people see it and are excited by it, and then you don't tour it again for a while because you have to redevelop all the material. So I think that we're in an interesting time where for a long, people were excited about making money off of it initially, and now people are trying to figure out what the right model is for using it as more of a marketing for your next tour.
And then for the subscriptions and the purchasing of the specials, you're just making money through like a revenue share, like some percentage of what people are paying.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so you have that component, and then there's the ticketing component. And this is, I'm kind of interested because I assume that like ticketing is done through a hodgepodge of local vendors and Ticketmaster, depending on the level of the comic, that like some random bar in Topeka, Kansas is not going to be compatible. Whatever their ticketing system is not going to be compatible with what you're doing. So what exactly are you doing on the ticketing side that's kind of innovating on that side?
Yeah, I mean, going back to kind of the gatekeeper elimination that we were talking about before, if now the artist is the best marketer of their goods, it's a very disconnected ecosystem, because the marketer or the comedian or the artist is now marketing their goods on a platform that they don't control, an inventory that they don't own. And so actually the whole hypothesis is if we can have the venue, the ticketing platform, and the artist all under one platform, then we're able to provide much better coordination and provide a whole bunch of efficiencies that result in a lot more ticket sales, which obviously benefits both venues and artists. So we've designed a ticketing system that does all of that essentially and allows someone to be able to buy a ticket just as easily from the comedian Punchup page as it does from the venue website. same inventory, same purchase flow, which is extremely slick. And we literally have counted the number of clicks to make sure that it's just the most minimal amount of data collection and minimal amount of steps before someone can buy a ticket. And so the idea is that we're just making it a lot easier for people to understand and find out about which shows they want to go see and then actually buy the tickets.
So we might be getting too technical for this podcast, but just to dive into that a little bit deeper. So let's say there's like some comedy place in some small city and they have 200 seats available and they're also using their own ticketing system. How is your ticketing system communicating with their ticketing system so you're not overselling seats and stuff like that?
We become their ticketing system.
Okay,
so it's
you're convincing that comedy place to switch out whatever they were using before with what you were doing. Okay,
exactly.
So you were like essentially competing now in the ticketing space, like with the Ticketmasters and all the other ones in some ways.
We're not really competing with Ticketmaster in that like we're not in the Beacon Theater, but we are certainly in the ticketing space.
Yeah. Okay. And then it's a clean experience. You're saying these comedians, they already have like a network. We already own the email addresses. In some cases, we might already own or already have their credit cards on file. So you're better off just doing it through our platform.
Yeah. The whole point is at the end of the day, everybody wants to sell more tickets. And so you can sell more tickets and make more money in one of two ways. You can increase the efficiency, and you can decrease costs. And so we're able to help people decrease their marketing costs because we have a whole built-in audience at this point. And similarly, we're able to increase the efficiency because we've taken a really hard look at all of the extraneous and unnecessary steps on purchasing a ticket and have just tried to make it as simple as possible for folks so no one gets confused.
And you also monetize that through a revenue share of some sort.
Yep, exactly. The whole hypothesis of the company is we do not want to be a new expense for consumers, venues, or artists. So artists are already making money by selling content on Patreon and on other platforms. So we are trying to help them in that same exact model. And ticketing platforms are already making money through selling tickets. And so we want to participate in that same model as well. So there's nothing new. Just the idea is by bringing it all under one umbrella, we're able to increase those overall sales.
So let's talk about the feed and content discovery. So talk me through the user journey. So they follow their favorite comedian, and this is just me guessing, so correct me if I'm wrong. They're following their favorite comedian on Instagram. The comedian says, hey, I have a new special out or a mini special. Follow the link in the bio. They click on that. They take them to their Punchup page. They have to sign up for account / give over their email address. Then what are they just following that comedian? Are they in like a TikTok like feed? Is it a following based feed or a recommendation feed? What's that kind of user journey from following this one comedian to somehow discovering other comedians and other content in the app?
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be honest, we're creating something new, so we're actually trying to figure this all out as we go. So I will explain how it works today, but we're continuing to iterate and experiment a bit. And so the way that it works today is, you would go and sign up for a single comedian's account, which means you have given that one comedian permission to contact you. But now that you're signed in, it's just one click to now subscribe to other comedians as well. We will also recommend other comedians that we think you might like so that you get access to more and more content, because otherwise you only get access to essentially a 30-second preview of the videos. And then you go to the feed, which gives recommendation-based content that you can either watch if you've already subscribed to the comedian, or again with one click, subscribe and then be able to watch the full video.
Will you see content in the feed from comedians you haven't subscribed to?
You will see a preview of content in the feed from comedians you're not subscribed to. Folks that we think you will like, that we are recommending you subscribe to so that you can watch all of their content.
And that's like a 60-second thing or something like that, right?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. And are you choosing those 30 seconds or the comedians choosing those 30 seconds?
The comedians have the option to choose it for the most part. What it actually is just the first 30 seconds of the clip.
Okay. And then so comedians obviously famously upload like clips to TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Sometimes it's crowd work. Sometimes it's just a single joke and stuff like that. Is that a smart way to use your platform, or is this more for like longer specials and then that 30 seconds is just some clip from the longer special? Like how do you think comedians should be using your platform?
I mean, I can tell you how it is working versus how I think it works best. How it's working right now is like we firmly believe in artistic expression and like wanting to essentially not give any notes to artists. So they are professional entertainers. It is their job to figure out whatever their audience wants. We are just here to give them tools so that they understand what is or is not working. Typically, what does work best is content that falls into one of three categories. One is stuff that you just can't say in other places because, again, you have what are called like brand safety concerns. So, like being able to say dead on our platform is possible and not on other platforms. The second, and I'm excited for you to dub that with unalive or whatever it is when you put this out. Two is stuff that's just early released, so putting it on our platform before you put it somewhere else. Joe List did this, for instance, with his special, and it performed amazingly well, and even cooler than that, it had a whole bunch of people sign up for his mailing list that he could then email when he put it on YouTube. And so Joe List was able to email tens of thousands of people the minute it went live on YouTube and say, hey, can you guys please go watch this to give it a pop in the algorithm? So not only did he get a ton of emails on Punchup, but then he also had a special that wildly outperformed his last one. And then the last category are just things that you don't want millions of people to see. So on our site, if millions of people see something, that means you got millions of email signups, which means you never have to worry about posting on social media ever again. The more likely scenario is that you're going to post and ideally thousands of people will see it. And that means if you have like a set that is a work in progress or just something that, you want your real fans to see, that you can put there as well.
So the stuff that they automatically are cross-posting the clip from TikTok to Instagram to YouTube Shorts, they're not then posting that same clip to Punchup. I
mean, some definitely are. I think we're experimenting with this. We actually are going to be rolling out a feature at some point that allows you to watch like quote unquote shorts. So like those 30, 45 second vertical videos without having to sign up for someone's mailing list. So we're kind of taking their lead as much as like we're giving them guidance, and we're seeing that a lot of people are cross-posting those things because what I laid out before of like the early preview, the uncensored stuff, or the stuff that you don't want a lot of people to see, that is not as voluminous, yeah, there we go, of content than the stuff that they're just posting every single day. So I think it's very much an exploration on our end as well. And like, again, the key thing to keep in mind is we have a large audience that is potentially different than the people that you are getting exposed to on social media. And so even if you are posting the same clip, you're still getting exposed to new people. So there's still a net benefit, even if it is stuff that you posted on other social platforms.
And the suggested content, is that like machine learning algorithm that's like suggesting that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then you mentioned you said something to do with advertising, like you can help them with like targeted based advertising. What is that?
Yeah. So we have the ability to promote shows on our site, but we also have the ability to run really well optimized advertising campaigns on Facebook, Instagram, and now actually Google. So we've just set everything up very properly, just given our background, to be able to run conversion optimized campaigns.
So that's just that's an API based ad buying platform that's on your platform.
Not exactly. We use actually the Facebook tooling. It's more that we've just set up the conversions API and Facebook Pixel properly to track events, and then have set up unique types of pages that allow us to run really efficient media.
But they're doing that through the punchup.live app or platform?
No, we do that for them.
So they're paying you.
Service.
So it's a service-based thing. So they're paying you some kind of fee, and there's some human being who's actually like almost like an agency type thing, basically.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. We run it at cost. Like fundamentally, like our incentives across the board are that we just want artists to be selling more tickets because ultimately we want to make our money on them selling tickets rather than on a services business. But yeah, that is exactly how it works. It's like a mini agency.
And who's the client for that? Is that like an already large comedian usually? Or,
honestly,
or an agent, one of their agents, their manager? Like who's hiring you to do that?
It's across the board. I mean, like at this point, it's working really well. So like from even the smallest comedian to the largest, for the most part, who it works best for are kind of those medium to large comedians, just because an advertisement doesn't actually convince anyone to go see your show for the most part. for the most part, what it does is let people who would want to go see your show be aware that you are coming to town. So if you have next to no followers, unless it is an incredibly good clip, for the most part, it's not really going to make a big difference. But if you have those million followers, clearly people like your content, but are not seeing it and therefore are not aware that you're coming to whatever city you referenced earlier, then this is where that really comes into help.
And then you can also buy ads on your platform as well, like that run in your own feed.
Yep, exactly right. We'll promote shows at the very top of our feed.
And that's because you have all this location data, so like so they can like literally target like people who have signed up who said they live in Phoenix or whatever.
Yep, exactly right.
So what has been the growth trajectory? I think you said 750,000 monthly active users and stuff like that. You had some early adopters, influencers. What's like, how do you get more comedians to adopt the platform, and what has happened as the platform has brought on like more comedians?
I mean, it really just came about through sweat equity. Like, again, it's funny, like, kind of thinking about all this for the first time in a while, but it took an enormous amount of work calling every single possible comedian and, like, really just kind of gaining the trust of the community. I had no background in entertainment, so really just had to kind of build this all out from scratch. And, Steve Byrne deserves a ton of credit. He was extremely helpful. But at the same time, like, we still just had to kind of go meet everyone and figure out how to make it all actually work.
Yeah, so when you listen to Jack Conte being interviewed, like, he tried to get so many YouTubers on Patreon, didn't work, and then he launched his own Patreon, and they saw it work for him, and he was already sort of famous on YouTube. And then as more famous YouTubers got on Patreon, then it became kind of like a signal to other YouTubers that this was a safe platform. Are you noticing the same effect where, like, because XYZ comedian is on this, it's like a value signal to other comedians that, like, okay, if this person's on this platform, then I should be on it as well.
Oh, 100%. First of all, I actually really like Jack Conte's band, Scary Pockets. They're awesome. So that's funny. I didn't know that was the exact evolution for him, but it's been the same thing for us. I mean, like, this all culminated. Shane Gillis just joined the platform, and you can't get much more validation than that. But it definitely, has been this progressive thing. Like, building up your own audience as an artist is an incredibly delicate thing, and you work so unbelievably hard to get some level of success. You don't want to just gamble it on something that's unknown. And so, I really respect and understand them wanting to be conservative on it. And that, it was exactly the path that we had to take of just kind of slowly building and establishing that credibility and making sure that people understood the value.
So there are so many stories now about musicians and other kinds of artists that started with no following on TikTok, and because of TikTok, literally starting from zero, they're now huge, Grammy-winning super platinum superstars. Same thing with YouTube and all the other major platforms. Obviously, your biggest goal to start with was to get the big, larger comedians with already existing followings on your platform, but I'm guessing kind of your long-term goal is that there are going to be comedians that are starting with like 0 followers on your platform, and through your platform are able to become kind of household names.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, like, we definitely had some, real success stories of people growing significantly on the platform. I mean, one thing to note is, like, right now it's an invitation-only platform where you have to have a manager and agent to join. So the idea that someone's going to grow from 0 is just not actually realistic at the moment. I think that we will figure things out in the long run. But right now, that's just like a strategic decision that we've made to avoid any real moderation problems. So, we just kind of use the managers and agents as a filter mechanism to make sure that we don't have, people spouting nonsense, and therefore I don't have to go through and moderate people's content.
But you envision that it'll eventually be open to everybody?
I think that we need to figure out the moderation piece. Coming from Facebook, I'm very careful around that specifically, but I think we want to make sure that we're providing, I really love what we've built. I'm really proud of it. I think that it works really well, and we want to provide that across the board to folks.
So when you look ahead, like 3 years from now, maybe by then you've raised more money, you've hired more people. What do you hope to be doing then that you're not doing now?
I think a few things. One, I want to be expanded into other verticals. We're starting with comedy, but we do want to move into music and other other forms of live entertainment. I think something else that we want to be doing is helping folks holistically with their businesses. So, I think entertainers have real opportunities to be developing larger businesses as opposed to helping other businesses advertise on their podcast, developing their own products. We want to help them out, developing those types of things. And then the last piece is really focusing on just the user side of things. I think right now we have a great user experience, but I think there's a lot of things that we can continue to improve. And I honestly just hope that we've built in even more mechanisms to allow people to discover shows and other experiences they want to go see. I really firmly believe in the value of live entertainment. And I want to help people get off their screens and go do things in real life as much as possible. And I think that we're doing a good job right now. We have a great nearby show section, but overall, we need to continue to improve that and provide new experiences.
Okay, Danny, those are all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
You can find me online at punchup.live.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.